The Hawthorne estate was so quiet you could hear the rain think. On the velvet sofa, Liam Hawthorne, the city's most feared Mafia boss, lay asleep. A wallet, a luxury watch, and crisp bills left careless on the table. Hidden cameras blinked red. The new maid stepped in, shoes barely whispering. Not a glance at the camera. Not a hand toward the money. What she did next made the predator hold his breath. The Hawthorne mansion didn't sleep. It listened. Every drop of rain that hit the glass felt amplified, as if the house itself was waiting for confession. Inside, Liam Hawthorne, the city's quietest power, and its most dangerous, sat in the center of his own trap. A silver wallet, a diamond watch, and a thick stack of cash lay on the coffee table like bait in a cathedral. Security cameras blinked their red pupils from the corners. He adjusted the cuff of his charcoal shirt, then leaned back on the velvet sofa and closed his eyes. To the world, he was a philanthropist. To everyone who mattered, a man whose signature could erase entire names. Tonight, he wanted to know one thing. Could anyone in his house still be honest? The door creaked. A woman's voice, low, steady, hummed under her breath as she entered with a tray of folded linens. Sophie Whitmore, the new maid. Hired 2 days ago, no references, only a trembling note from a community shelter saying, "Give her a chance." Her shoes clicked softly on the marble. She stopped when she saw the wallet and watch, glimmering under the chandelier. Her gaze didn't linger. Instead, she looked toward him, still as stone, then at the rain beyond the window. He watched through half-closed lashes. Most people hesitated. Greed always had a heartbeat. She didn't. Sophie walked to the table, picked up a stray book from the floor, and gently placed it over the cash, as if shielding it from the storm's reflection. Then, seeing the chill at his sleeve, she took a blanket from the chair and laid it across his shoulders. Her whisper was barely sound. "Thank you for this job, Mr. Hawthorne. I won't let you down." The scent of soap and rain drifted with her as she left the room. The door clicked shut. Liam opened his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, a pause in the noise. He reached for the remote and replayed the camera feed. There it was again, the quiet decision no one was supposed to make. Not theft, not calculation, just decency, unrecorded. Except it was. He rewound once more, watching her cover the money, the way her hand trembled slightly when she adjusted the blanket. He zoomed in until the frame blurred. Behind him, thunder rolled over the city. He muted the sound but couldn't silence the echo in his mind. Who walks into a mafia boss's living room and hides his money for him? He leaned back, exhaled slow, and smirked at the ceiling. "Either you're the best liar I've ever met," he murmured, "or the only honest soul left in this house." Lightning strobed across the windows, flashing on the glass cases that lined the room, relics of a life built on caution. He felt suddenly absurd, a man surrounded by cameras still unsure of what was real. From the hallway came the faint sound of Sophie greeting the cook, laughter soft as fabric. Liam muted the monitors, letting the sound fade. He didn't know it yet, but the test he thought he'd set for her had already begun to test him. He rose, poured himself a drink, and pressed rewind one more time, the camera light blinking like a pulse as the storm grew louder outside. Morning broke dull and silver. The storm had rinsed the city clean, but inside the Hawthorne estate the air still felt heavy, like the night hadn't quite ended. Liam sat before the wall of monitors, sleeves rolled, eyes on the paused frame, Sophie covering the money with that small, unguarded gesture. He had watched it more times than he'd admit, as if a new meaning might reveal itself between the pixels. "Play it again," he told the system. Her reflection flickered across 10 screens at once, each angle showing something he couldn't catalog. The steadiness, the lack of calculation, the warmth that looked out of place in a house built on suspicion. A voice at the doorway. "You've been here since dawn, sir." It was Margaret, his head housekeeper, coffee tray trembling slightly. She followed his gaze to the monitors and smiled faintly. "Good hearts don't always announce themselves, Mr. Hawthorne." He said nothing. Compliments still felt like liabilities. When Margaret left, he muted the feeds but didn't shut them off. Instead, he switched cameras. Hallway, kitchen, servants' quarters. Sophie was already at work. She moved quietly, efficient but gentle, adjusting a crooked painting, helping the chauffeur fold an umbrella, placing fresh fruit in the bowl by the entrance. She didn't know he was watching. Something about her pace calmed the rooms. Even the guards in the lobby had stopped swearing under their breath. In the kitchen, she lifted a small box onto the counter. Peaches, not part of the order list, and left a note in neat cursive. For Mrs. Green. Saw these in the market. Thought they'd help her joints. He caught himself smiling. It startled him. His phone buzzed. A text from Harold, his driver. "The girl gave me her umbrella when I dropped her yesterday. Said storms pass quicker when you stay kind." Kind. The word landed like an old song he'd forgotten. He turned off the screens at last, stood, and stared out the window. The estate gardens shimmered wet and quiet, statues streaked with rain. He could almost hear his mother's voice. "You can't buy loyalty, Liam. You earn it in small ways." For years, he had dismissed that as sentiment. Yet one woman's small ways were undoing everything his empire taught him. By afternoon, he sent for her. Then changed his mind. Twice. Instead, he slipped on his coat and walked the corridors himself. From the mezzanine, he could hear her humming. Same tune as the night before, soft, certain. He paused, unseen, watching her dust the marble rail with care that had nothing to do with paychecks. For the first time, the mansion didn't feel like a fortress. It felt alive. He turned back toward his office, unsettled. A man used to predicting outcomes had found something unpredictable. That evening, his assistant handed him an invitation list for the weekend luncheon. Among the names penciled at the bottom, one was written neatly in new ink, Sophie Whitmore. He looked up, half a smile forming. Let's see how the house behaves when the cameras aren't the only ones watching. By Saturday, the mansion hummed like a stage before curtain rise. Silverware flashed under chandeliers, servants moved in rehearsed silence, and every guest who mattered to the city's money had promised to attend. It was the kind of gathering where smiles were currency and rumors the wine. Liam Hawthorne arrived late to his own luncheon, dressed like calm authority in charcoal and gold cufflinks. He scanned the crowd. His empire had faces now. Bankers, lawyers, old allies pretending innocence. And, at the far end, arranging tulips on a side table, stood Sophie Whitmore. A simple uniform, steady hands, no trace of nerves. He noticed her only when others did. Mrs. Crestmer's voice floated through the chatter. "Mr. Hawthorne," she purred. "Someone seems to have dropped this." She held up a folded lavender handkerchief embroidered SW. The room quieted. "Found it near the silver tray," she added with a tone that said thief without the word. Liam felt the eyes turn towards Sophie. She didn't flinch, only glanced at the cloth as if seeing an old wound reopen. Margaret stepped forward. "That's hers, ma'am, but it's clean. She carries it always." Mrs. Crestmer's smile thinned. "So do pickpockets." The laughter that followed was polite and poisonous. Sophie bowed her head. "I'll leave the room," she said quietly. Liam's jaw tightened. "You'll stay." The conversation stumbled back to champagne and business, but the moment lingered like smoke. He excused himself minutes later and found Sophie in the hallway, gathering her things into a small canvas bag. "You don't owe them silence," he said. She looked up at him, calm, almost tired. "Silence is safer, sir. People remember the rumor, not the truth." Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed the tremor. "You've heard something like this before," he guessed. She nodded. "At the nursing home where I worked, a patient's ring went missing. I found it in the laundry cart, gave it back. They said I stole it first. By the time they found out I hadn't, the damage was done." Liam exhaled, a slow, heavy sound. He had built a fortune on suspicion, and it was eating its way back through him. He reached into his jacket and drew out the lavender handkerchief. "It was under the dessert platter," he said, "not near it." He placed it in her hand. "I'm sorry." Sophie hesitated, then folded it neatly. "Thank you, sir, but I'll still leave tomorrow." He stopped her at the door. "There's something I want to show you first." She looked unsure. "The gardens," he said. "My mother's. No one goes there anymore." For the first time, the edge in his voice softened. "If you walk away now, you'll never believe I mean this apology." The corridor light caught the rain beginning again outside, fine and silver. Sophie nodded once, slow. "Just 5 minutes, Mr. Hawthorne?" He smiled faintly. 5 minutes, he echoed, without realizing that those 5 minutes would last the rest of his life. The back door opened onto silence and wet earth. Sophie hesitated on the threshold. The night air still smelled of rain and roses long gone wild. Liam flicked on a single lantern. Its light painted the gravel path gold, then vanished into green shadow. "This was my mother's garden," he said quietly. "No one touches it now." Vines climbed the iron archway, twisting through marble angels that time had weathered soft. Sophie stepped forward, fingertips grazing the rim of a stone basin overflowing with rainwater. The reflection rippled, doubling her face with the statue above. 2 women, both trying to endure. "She used to say flowers don't need perfect soil," Liam continued. "Just someone to believe they'll grow." He caught himself, surprised at his own words. He'd planned to apologize, not to remember. Sophie crouched near a patch of half-wild jasmine. "Belief makes things bloom," she said. "Maybe that's what's missing in this place." He watched her brush a petal from her sleeve. For years, he had surrounded himself with marble and metal, men who followed orders but never looked past them. Now, this stranger was teaching him what mercy looked like, and she hadn't even raised her voice. "I shouldn't have doubted you," he said at last. "It's a habit I built so nothing could hurt me." Sophie stood, meeting his gaze. "And did it work?" He smiled faintly. "Until last week." For a moment, the only sound was water dripping from the trellis. She turned toward the house, voice low. "You don't owe me peace, Mr. Hawthorne. I just want my work to mean something." He followed her glance to the lantern light swaying in the wind. "You gave this house more peace in 3 days than I have in 10 years." They walked the path once more, the storm's humidity clinging to the air. When they reached the veranda, thunder grumbled far away. Less threat, more reminder. Liam stopped her at the steps. "There's a library upstairs," he said, "full of books no one reads. They're going to charity soon. You'd know which ones deserve saving." It wasn't an order. It sounded almost like a favor. Sophie studied him, uncertain if the offer was gratitude or test. "All right," she said, "but I'll need time." "You'll have it," he replied, "and the key." He handed her the small brass key from his pocket, its surface worn smooth from years untouched. Lightning blinked once across the horizon, and the whole garden glowed for a heartbeat. Color, rain, stone, and 2 people caught between apology and something unspoken. As they stepped inside, the wind rose again, rattling the windows like warning. Margaret appeared at the corridor end, whispering, "Sir, the power grid's failing. Another storm's coming." Liam glanced toward the darkening sky, the brass key still warm in Sophie's hand. "Then we keep the lights on," he said, "this time for the right reason." The second storm hit harder than the first. By dusk, the horizon was one long flash of white fire and wind that pressed the windows inward like fists. Power vanished. The mansion sighed into darkness, its heartbeat now only the rain. Liam grabbed the emergency lamp from the wall and stepped into the hall. "Sophie," he called. The echo came back thinner than his voice. He found her in the kitchen wing, sleeves rolled, trying to close a cracked window before the wind tore it from the hinges. Water streaked her arms. Curls clung to her forehead. "Let it go," he said, pulling it shut with her. The latch caught, and quiet fell, except for their breathing. The lamp threw a circle of amber across the room. Every utensil gleamed, every surface shone clean from her hand. The storm clawed at the walls outside, but in here, everything felt still. "You should rest," he said. "I can't," she replied. "There's food spoiling already. I'll move it to the cellar." He watched her work, candlelight catching the gold in her eyes. The world could have drowned outside, and she would still have found something worth saving. When she turned to him, her voice softened. "Why does a man like you live behind cameras and guards?" He hesitated. "Habit. Protection turns into prison if you wear it long enough." "And no one ever opened the door?" "No one stayed," he said simply. For a moment, the thunder quieted, as if listening. Sophie draped a towel over her shoulders. "People aren't property, Mr. Hawthorne. You don't lose them because they walk away. You lose them when they stop believing you can change." He leaned against the counter, the weight of her words heavier than any threat. "You think I can?" She looked at him for a long second. "You already started. You just don't know it yet." Lightning flared. The kitchen burst into white for a heartbeat. When it faded, she was closer, steady, calm. He reached out, then stopped halfway, hand hovering near hers. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For staying." Her smile was small but certain. Storms pass quicker when someone keeps the light on. The generator hummed to life upstairs. Half the bulbs flickered back. He exhaled, almost laughing at the timing. "Looks like we're not finished yet," she said, brushing her hands. "No," he agreed, watching the rain ease to a whisper. "We're just beginning." They cleaned in silence, two shadows moving in sync while the thunder rolled away over the sea. When she finally left to rest, he stayed behind, tracing her words in his mind like a map out of loneliness. His phone buzzed on the counter, Margaret's voice urgent on the line. "Sir, tomorrow's charity gala. The guest list just changed. Someone from your past is coming." Liam looked toward the corridor where Sophie's footsteps had faded. "Then let it come," he said quietly. "Let them see what storms leave behind." The mansion shone again by the next evening. Crystal, brass, and polished marble. Every surface trying to forget the storm. The annual charity gala was meant to remind the city that Liam Hawthorne still ruled its skyline. But tonight, the power in the room wasn't his money. It was what he planned to say. Guests glittered beneath chandeliers. Music swelled, cameras blinked, politicians rehearsed their smiles. Sophie moved quietly among them, helping Margaret with trays, unaware that every step she took rewrote the man watching from the stage. When the music faded, Liam took the microphone. His voice was steady, measured. "This house has been many things," he began. "A fortress, a business, sometimes a burden. But lately, it's learned something new, how to be grateful." Eyes turned toward him, curious. He scanned the crowd until he found her near the doorway. "For years, I believed trust was weakness," he continued, "until someone proved that kindness doesn't need witnesses to be real." He didn't name her, but the weight of the words found their mark. Even Mrs. Crestmore lowered her gaze. At the end of his speech, he opened a small velvet box and lifted a silver pendant, shaped like a star, simple, radiant. "This belonged to my mother," he said. "She wore it when she still believed good people existed." Then, to quiet applause, he stepped from the stage and crossed to Sophie. "Every foundation needs light," he said softly, fastening the pendant around her neck. The moment lasted only a breath, but it changed the air in the room. Later, the mansion was silent again. Sophie packed her few belongings in the servants' quarters. A sealed envelope lay on her pillow, his handwriting on the front. Full scholarship, Hawthorne Foundation. Follow what makes you whole. She pressed the paper to her chest, a smile and a tear arriving together. By dawn, the cab lights carried her down the hill and out of sight. Months passed. Winter surrendered to spring, and the garden behind the mansion began to bloom without permission. Liam walked its paths alone now, the air sweeter, the silence easier. One morning, a note waited by the fountain. Beside it, a folded handkerchief stitched with 2 letters entwined, S and L. The note read simply, "For the home that finally learned how to open its doors." He stood there for a long time, the sound of bees in the jasmine, the city murmuring far below. The world outside was still sharp and unfinished, but something in him had softened for good. He placed the handkerchief on the marble edge, sunlight warming the initials. Then he looked up toward the house, where light spilled through open windows and curtains moved freely in the wind. For the first time in his life, Liam Hawthorne felt unguarded and realized that peace, like trust, begins when you finally stop testing it.